Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we'll be doing a debrief of Terry's story. We'll be doing the key takeaways as well as the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Terry's story. And we do have a content warning for today as we do discuss physical abuse in this story on a number of occasions. And that is your content warning for today. And now we'll get into a summary of Terry's story for those of you who have not heard it yet. Terry was married early in her life to someone that she had met when she was a teenager. They raised children, they built a home, and lived a pretty fairly traditional life. And as that marriage began to unravel, Terry met a personal trainer at the boxing gym who ended up being her abuser. He was charismatic, he was very attentive to her, and he was very persistent. He made her feel noticed during a period of time when she was grieving and lacking confidence and feeling less needed by the people around her. And this person pursued Terry even after she initially resisted. And he treated her refusal as something he could just wear down rather than a boundary that really needed to be respected. But eventually Terry gives in, and once this relationship began, then he helped transform her body. He helped her enter the fitness industry. He gave her advice. And while she is getting help from him, he is also getting help from her. So he's getting emotional support from her. He's regularly needing errands run and a lot of favors. So at this point, their relationship starts to begin like feeling like a team. That's what it feels like it's going on here. But at the same time, he's starting to separate Terry from other people. He told Terry that her family was jealous of her physical transformation. And when she spent time with friends, he demanded constant communication, and missing a call or taking too long to respond to this abuser could really lead to a huge explosion. And eventually, avoiding friends for Terry became easier than dealing with the abuser's reaction. And then the abuse escalated. The abuser criticizes her age, insults her abilities, and tells her that she has a terrible memory. Then he praises her in front of other people and describes her as this hardworking and talented person. So this is really confusing for Terry at this point. He begins to threaten to destroy her income, expose private things about her, and even harm her children. And this is when things really start to become severe from the violence point of view. He begins to attack her from behind. At one point, he knees her in the stomach. He's broken through doors, threatens her with a baseball bat. He shoves her into a wall, leaving her with a head wound where she had to get medical treatment. And then there were arrests. There were restraining orders. There were attempts to escape by Terry as well. And then he began to stalk her. He used burner phones. He drove through her neighborhood wearing a ski mask. He commented on clothing she was wearing from somewhere outside her home. He appeared at her workplace, and he even damaged her property. And even when Terry did leave, when she moved across the country, this abuser continued to search for her. And her response was to go public and start naming the abuser in hopes that it would help stop him from what was going on. And eventually it does. And that is a summary of Terry's story. And now we'll get into the key takeaways. Key takeaway number one is the first boundary violation was treated like romance. So Terry's abuser just relentlessly pursued her. She repeatedly pushed him away, but he continued pursuing her. The abuser here is treating her no as an obstacle. So persistence here begins to get romanticized. And in society, a lot, persistence gets romanticized. A lot of times in movies, it teaches that the person who just keeps trying to pursue you is passionate and devoted or willing to fight for love. And this happens a lot with survivors of abuse. It's kind of ingrained in us at this societal level that this is a normal sign of love, commitment. Many see it as flattery, but for many, like Terry, This wouldn't stop here. This person became a stalker as the relationship unraveled. And what this early event really shows us is this entitlement to get what they want with no regard to what the other person desires at all. And in this case, and in like many people's cases, this persistence, this first boundary violation, is treated as being seen as love and like romance. And it's something that we kind of have to get our minds off of, that no, this is a boundary violation that's going on. And this is someone who is not listening to you and not listening to the word no. And the second key takeaway here is feeling needed became part of the bond. So Terry described this feeling of being less needed before this relationship began. Her children were older. The role she had occupied at home, that stay-at-home mother, was changing. Her marriage was ending. And then this person comes into her life who constantly needed something. He needed meals. He needed errands. He needed emotional support. He needed Terry just to rescue him and take care of him. So this dynamic here is giving Terry a role that she knew how to fill and that she was familiar with. So she was just no longer feeling invisible in her life anymore. All of a sudden, she was feeling important again. So for some, emotional caretaking can be a huge deal breaker, but for others, it can be how they derive value or feel needed or useful. However, in the wrong hands, an abuser really can exploit this to an extremely unhealthy, abusive level. And like Terry, their value becomes connected to how well they are managing the other person's life. And Terry hoped that if she stayed consistent enough or loving enough, he would eventually just become the person she saw during the good periods of the relationship early on. And this relationship was harming Terry in a huge way, but at the same time, it was also giving her a sense of purpose. So it's quite a combination that can really keep someone stuck in a relationship for a long time. It's confusing, and it takes a while to make sense of, as it's two things that are existing here at the same time. And this can keep you in a relationship, an abusive relationship, longer. And number 3 on our list of key takeaways is isolation was created through consequences. So Terry's abuser made social situations really tough. And when she went out, he required constant contact. She had to answer quickly. She couldn't miss a call. Any delay could lead to accusations, rage, or just a huge punishment of some sort. And eventually, the easier option for Terry was just to stay home. And this is how coercive control really works. The consequences here were huge, and Terry, the survivor here, starts enforcing the rules themselves. So Terry began avoiding friends because she knew what would happen afterward. So here is where isolation could really seem voluntary, and that the abuser could never say that they stopped them from going anywhere. And technically, Terry could leave the house, but that's not freedom at all. Freedom requires someone to be able to walk through a door, back through the door, without facing any sort of intimidation, interrogation, threats, yelling, screaming, accusations, or anything when it comes to violence. So Terry's choices here really became organized around preventing the abuser's reactions, and that is coercive control. It is control. A lot of you are going through this right now, and my heart goes out to all of you, and a lot of you have already gone through it and just need this hammered home, because a lot of people were dealing with the idea that they didn't tell me that I couldn't go out with these people, but there were consequences if you did, and you knew what those consequences were. So you started to enforce those rules yourself and started to stay home more and more and more often. And the next thing on our list we have is threats against her children expanded the control over her. So physical violence was happening, and it's not the only thing that was keeping Terry trapped. There's a lot of things keeping Terry trapped, but when it came to the violence, her abuser learned that threats against her children had even more power than the physical violence that he was using on Terry. So when he threatened to harm the children, leaving was no longer this decision involving only Terry's safety. She had to consider what the abuser might do to her children, and this is a huge part of coercive control. The abuser really can turn the survivor's love for their children into a huge amount of leverage. So this is a real threat to be taken seriously. And it was really a real huge threat, and one of the many reasons why Terry stayed and why many of you stay. And then the next thing on our list is restraining orders did not end the abuse. And in Terry's case, it escalated things. So keeping the abuser in her life felt safer to Terry. And this is a really confusing thing for people, because a lot of people think that when you get a restraining order, things are going to settle down. But that's not always the case. It's an abuser by an abuser case that we're going on here. Not every person is the same. And you have to figure out what to do when it comes to safety and what is the safest thing to do. And sometimes these things can keep you in relationships longer, because no decision is going to be correct. And Terry described this restraining order here as making the stalking even worse. And as I said before, this doesn't mean the restraining orders are useless. It just means that this specific abuser, really felt entitled to the access, and this just kind of inflamed them even more. And he was using this restraining order as just this other reason in his mind to escalate. And this abuser started to appear in disguises. He used burner phones. He watched her home. He contacted her repeatedly. So for Terry, keeping him in her life eventually felt safer than not knowing where he was. So contact with this abuser gave her information that she wouldn't be getting when the restraining order was going on, when things were silent. So she could hear what mood he was in. She could anticipate where he might be. She might be able to temporarily calm him down. And no contact created, this restraining order created this uncertainty that was going on. He could appear anywhere. So when danger really becomes quite unpredictable like that, for Terry and some of you out there, keeping the abuser close can feel like keeping the threat around where it can actually be seen. And it's scary. And many of you out there might have to think about these choices, as these are terrifying and real choices that need to be made. And everything here must be done quite safely. And it's another reason why it is difficult to leave when something like this is going on. And I'm not saying that restraining orders are completely useless or anything like that. And I'm not saying that you have to stay in contact with the person. This is just what Terry did. And it was a choice that she made until she eventually figured out that the way for her to deal with the abuser was to start going public with his name. And eventually the abuser does leave her alone. But it took that step for it to happen. But these are very scary choices that you have to make. And, some of them require you to be in contact with them a little bit longer until you can figure out what to do at that point. And then the last thing on our list here was that leaving was an ongoing process. And for many of you out there, this is what is going on with you. It's not easy to leave. On average, it takes 7 times to leave. Terry just didn't leave once. She tried to leave repeatedly. She involved her family, drove to Oregon, planned to move to Idaho, restraining orders. She moved home. She blocked phone numbers. And then she eventually crosses the country. And we often treat leaving as like one moment of time. But in abusive relationships, leaving is a long process. So all of these different switches that were going on and different repeated processes, going back, leaving again, figuring things out. This is just a normal process that someone can go through. That one time someone leaves, it can happen for some people, but not all people. 2 times can happen for some people, not all people. Leaving always doesn't look the same. There's nothing to be ashamed about of taking multiple times for this to happen. This is how things work. And for you, this is how it is going to work. If it's going to take multiple times, it's going to take multiple times. But that's the process that you have to go through to get to where you're going. And there's no shame in that for anyone who's dealing with this right now or did deal with this in the relationship. Being abused isn't your fault. You're just trying to figure out the best way for yourself to leave, safest way to leave. And especially if you have a trauma bond and you still love this person, it's really difficult to leave and it's really easy to be sucked back in. So give yourself some grace when it comes to this. So that was the key takeaways of this story, of Terry's story. And now we're going to get into the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Terry's story. So fear in Terry's relationship is a huge reason why she stayed. Not the only reason she stayed, but a big one. And she knew that her abuser was capable of anything. He had physically attacked her, he threatened her children, damaged property, targeted people around her, and he followed through on these threats. So this was nothing to dismiss at all. And leaving often made his behavior worse. So when Terry tried to create distance, he called incessantly, showed up at her home, workplace, watched her from outside, as mentioned before, used burner phones, followed her. He violated restraining orders. That is scary. So this is teaching Terry here that separation could bring even more danger. So at times, keeping this abuser in her life, as we mentioned before, was a safer thing to do because of this fear. Contact gave her this sense that she knew his mood. No contact meant that he could appear without warning. So fear here kept Terry focused on preventing escalation. She was just trying to stay as safe in the relationship as possible. She was staying because she had learned that trying to leave could make the danger even more unpredictable. And a lot of you are going through that, but this kept her in this relationship longer. And then we have obligation. And really, Terry felt indebted to this abuser. He helped her transform her body. He helped her find work as a trainer. He offered advice. He created that feeling that they were a team. But he also presented himself as this troubled and wounded person. And Terry felt responsible for helping him become better. She believed her loyalty and strength might save him from his own behavior. And that sense of obligation kept her focused on his potential, while her own safety here continues to get thrown by the wayside, and it kept her in this relationship longer. And then we have the guilt of this relationship. And for Terry, there was guilt around abandoning someone that she saw as really deeply troubled. He presented himself as someone who really needed her help, and Terry began to believe that her strength could save him. Therefore, leaving could then feel like giving up on someone who was really damaged, even though he was the one choosing to be the abuser toward her. So this guilt kept her focused on her believing that she was failing him if she was not to focus on him and leave him, so which kept her in this relationship longer. And then there is the shame aspect of this story. And Terry bailed out her abuser after an arrest. She returned after a lot of the violence that had taken place. She asked for charges to be dropped, and she had fled from him and then gone back. So every time she returned, it really made it harder for her to reach out to other people because she felt shame of how those other people might judge her, interpret all of the choices that she made. And shame here is telling a survivor that they have returned too many times to ask for help again and again and again. But in reality here, support should never have any sort of end date when it comes to this. Support should always be there for you and be non-judgmental. But Terry had shame that those people would be judgmental. And a lot of you have that as well. And when that is going on, over time, the shame that here is created for staying after all of these things can then start to hinder you to get help and keep you in this relationship longer. So that was the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Terry's story. And now these are the things that I want for Terry going forward. Number one, I want Terry to trust her instincts again, because for years, Terry was taught that her instincts were wrong, her memory was unreliable, and that her fear was just an overreaction. So I just want Terry to start strengthening that part of herself again, because that part of her was there the entire time. And I also want her to stop carrying responsibility for the years that she went back. So Terry went back because she was trauma bonded, she was threatened, there was a lot of fear going on. So I just wanted her to see all of those things with compassion. I want her to give herself grace. Like with addicts, there are relapses, but those are just opportunities to try again. They are experiences to learn from. Relapses happen. So I really want Terry to stop carrying this responsibility for going back, and I want for that for you too. And the last thing here, I want Terry to start to see herself as the lead actor in her own life. And for Terry, this abuser spent years trying to control where she went, who she spoke to, how she earned money, And so I want Terry's life just to belong to Terry and to see herself as the lead actor in her own movie, in her own play, and that she's not to play second fiddle to anyone else. And I want that for everyone out there as well. If you're in it right now or you are out of it right now, I want you to be the main actor in your life. And I hope that you found this debrief episode helpful, found this educational, enlightening, or validating. And if you want to be a guest on our Survivor Story episodes, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on our guest form button, fill out the form, press the submit button. We'll go from there. We also have a support group on our website, so if you need support, join our support group today. And we also have a newsletter where you get a free workbook for every new Survivor Story that comes out, all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for today's debrief episode. So for myself and Terry, we hope you have a good night.